Ever since the PlayStation wriggled its way onto the console market in 1994, Sony has been at the top of the industry. I'm kidding, of course. If that were true, we wouldn't have to make this list. Regardless, though, it's fair to say that they usually do pretty well. So well, in fact, that even some of their stumbles have worked out in their favour. For instance, are you finding it impossible to get hold of a PS5? Congratulations! That means you have a pulse. In spite of the shortage, however, it's managing to sell tremendously well, and its exclusives are some of the best reviewed out there. All of which is to say that Sony only rarely has to deal with actual fallout from actual problems, as they usually come through just fine. Good for them, I guess, but we're here to shine a light on everything the company probably wishes we'd forget. And as we do so, maybe you will all stop calling us Sony ponies in the comments, or PlayStation stans, or iToy boys. Alright, I made that last one up, but only to get ahead of you. I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are the 10 worst decisions Sony ever made. Number 10. Mishandling Crossplay. While Sony has always been criticised for its unwillingness to accept games being played by fans across multiple platforms, the recent Apple vs Epic legal battles have dug up some interesting new information. As it happens, Sony is the only platform to charge game publishers for implementing cross-platform play, if not enough of those players are spending money through Sony's storefronts. This means that hypothetically, if 80% of Fortnite's player base were on PlayStation, but those players only generated 10% of the game's total microtransaction revenue, Sony would charge Epic Games a fee. Conversely, if those players are buying cosmetics through Sony's storefront at a rate that Sony deems satisfactory, Epic won't be asked to cough up more money. And, the more we describe it, the more it feels like we're summarising Goodfellas. This has understandably been criticised, as it will only push developers away from implementing crossplay on PlayStation. That hurts Sony's customers, who end up being punished for having friends who own Microsoft or Nintendo consoles. It doesn't help that a few years ago, Sony's CEO, Kenichiro Yoshida, dismissed crossplay by basically saying there's no need for anyone to be playing these games elsewhere because PlayStation is the best, which, even if you favour Sony hardware, is quite clearly what the French call le load of old bullocks. Number 9. The PlayStation 3 and Vita store closure debacle. There's backing yourself into a corner, and then there's this. For some reason, Sony thought it would be a good idea to close the PS3, Vita, and PSP stores. The demise of these three platforms was set for July 2021, and the decision didn't prove popular. While closing down lesser-used platforms is understandable, the real problem came from Sony's reluctance to embrace backwards compatibility. Keeping PlayStation's history alive doesn't seem to be a priority. While Nintendo seems to get the most flack for this sort of thing, Sony are just as bad, if not worse. Very few pre-PS4 titles are available in the PlayStation Store, and the PS5 doesn't play physical games earlier than the PS4 either. This disregard for the past is what made the impending store closures disappointing. The PS3, Vita, and PSP stores were the only places you could buy certain titles. Lose the shops, and you lose a chunk of gaming history. Ultimately, the backlash led them to reverse their decision, but only to a degree. The PSP shop had no such stay of execution, and that doesn't bode well for the other storefronts, which might stick around a little longer, but will not hang on forever. Number 8. Not telling 77 million people that they'd been hacked. Hi, hello. I just wanted to pop in very quickly to say that if 77 million people have been hacked, you should probably tell someone about it. Right? Right. Okay, yeah, common sense here, people. In 2011, the PlayStation Network suffered a week-long outage. It was a horrendous time during which gamers couldn't play or download anything online, and were forced to do something else, potentially even go outside like some sort of animal. Or maybe just play a single-player game or something. It wasn't that bad really, now I think about it. But the outage wasn't the real problem. Behind the scenes, 77 million users had their account details stolen in one of the largest hacks of all time. It's debatable how much we can blame Sony for the hack in the first place. I mean, I doubt a Sony executive said, "I think we should recklessly give all of our users' details away," but we can place a hell of a lot of blame on them for choosing to wait a full week to tell anyone about it, preventing the affected users from taking action, changing passwords, or, monitoring their bank accounts until it could have been too late. I love you, Sony, but it sure would have been helpful if you told me that some stranger had spent my life savings on the dark web. Number 7. PS Now being a streaming service. The concept of streaming games from anywhere is an appealing one. You don't have to download anything, games can potentially be cheaper, and you don't need a big bulky device to power them. You could literally pick up your phone and play the latest AAA releases. Why you'd want to do that, I'm not too sure, but still, nice option, I guess. The thing is, trusting every gamer's individual ISP to supply a constant, reliable internet connection is a level of hopeful optimism usually only seen in retro revival Kickstarters. When PS Now launched in 2015, it offered a selection of games available for free, other than the cost of the subscription, of course. There was only one problem. The games could only be streamed, not downloaded, and required a sturdy internet connection lest they be rendered, quite literally, unplayable. Today, PS Now allows certain games to be played offline, but only years after its initial launch. And considering the fact that PS Now launched before its direct competitor, the exponentially more popular Xbox Game Pass, the console subscription service race would likely look very different if only Sony had taken PS Now more seriously from the jump. Number 6. Focusing on blockbusters. In many ways, Xbox and PlayStation are pretty similar. You can talk about teraflops and frames per second comparisons till you're blue in the face, but it doesn't really matter. The consoles do basically the same thing, and cross-platform games will often be indistinguishable. Whatever you choose to play it on, Balan Wonderworld will always be rubbish. Still, there is one huge difference between Sony and Microsoft. If you want cheaper, smaller, unique titles built to increase the value of Game Pass, go with Xbox. If it's high-quality, painstakingly created AAA blockbusters that you're after, go with PlayStation. Basically, it's all down to preference, but it also shines a light on an interesting problem. It seems that neither company really understands the concept of balance. In Sony's case, most of us can't justify spending £70 regularly on video games. That's why the likes of Game Pass are so appealing. And even if PS Now were everything we wanted it to be, Sony's lack of consistent output means the service has little first-party support. The games may be good, but we certainly aren't getting many of them. Sony's reliance on blockbusters has even caused issues with their own studios, who don't want to spend years of crunch time to meticulously craft established narrative-led franchise entries. Dissatisfied developers likely aren't going to be creative or innovative, meaning we may well be looking at a future in which the quality of Sony's games drops significantly. So please, Sony, let game devs be game devs. We need creativity and variety, even if you do get lots of fancy awards doing it your way. Number 5. The PlayStation Classic. Motivated by Nintendo's NES Classic Edition, Sony released the PlayStation Classic in 2018. It was a miniature version of the original PlayStation that included a collection of the system's greatest releases. The thing is, while it did include the likes of Metal Gear Solid, Abe's Odyssey, and Final Fantasy VII, it lacked some other big names. No Tomb Raider, no Crash Bandicoot, no Parappa the Rapper. Many of the titles synonymous with the original PlayStation were missing from the collection. But that's not all. It was also criticised for its lousy UI, the fact that it didn't even have the correct versions of certain games for their regions, low picture quality, and the all-round poor attempt at emulation. And considering that's literally the only thing this device was created to do, that's not a great look, is it? It's easy to imagine what Sony could have done differently, and just about all of it would have been better than what they actually did. Everything from including more games to simply running the games it did did include to a higher standard. I know, I'm making simply outlandish requests here. Who do I think I am? Number 4, their questionable advertising campaigns. We've covered some of this topic before in our 2 advertising campaigns that backfired videos. Go and watch them for more context, you lovely sausage you. But it bears repeating. While their exploits in marketing the PSP and Vita managed to offend just about anybody with a conscience, Sony's spree of undoubtedly strange adverts have baffled more than motivated the consumers. There have been good ones, such as the PS2's Mountain ad, but the sheer amount of downright nonsense that has come out of Sony's marketing department is something else, quite frankly. Coincidentally, their most baffling ads came around the PS3 era. Now, I'm not saying that the PS3 failed because of weird advertising, it was definitely the price, but stuff like this certainly can't have helped, can it? From odd-looking Scots monologuing about bugger knows what, to eggs exploding into birds, to porn stars pursuing golfers like prey, it's all been rather strange. There's been weird 90s techno nonsense, David Lynch directed oddities, and most harrowing of all, the crying baby. I'm still scarred by that one, and frankly, I'm a bit upset that you've made me bring it up. Number 3, Knack. We've covered launch lineups before. Quite a lot of them, actually. In an ideal world, a launch title for a new system should showcase what that console can really do. Just look at the Demon's Souls remake, or even Astro's Playroom for an example of how to do it right. Just forget about Godfall though, yeah? Still, while the PS5 has got off to a good start, the PS4 had one particular launch game that left a sour taste for those keen fans who dove in on day one. Knack, which impressively managed to disappoint just about everybody. It was part of the cheapest PS4 bundle on launch day, seemingly scientifically engineered to crush the hopes and dreams of children everywhere. Just imagine if the first game on your new shiny system were Knack. Well, you won't have to imagine it because that was the case in 2013. The first release on a brand new system, and it's the video game equivalent of plain bran flakes. Granted, we didn't have to play it. We could have just left the console in its box and stared at it until something better came along. It certainly sounds like more fun. Number 2, abandoning the Vita. We already mentioned the Vita store closure kerfuffle, but Sony gave up on its handheld long before that little mess. The Vita released in the West in 2012, and Sony stopped developing games for it after only 3 years. For comparison, that would have been like them giving up on the PS4 4 years before The Last of Us Part 2. That is a ludicrously short lifespan. Third parties and ports kept the system going for a while, which was great, but Sony put a stop to that as well by discontinuing production of the thing in 2019, driving the final nail into its coffin after a long and embarrassing death. For such an impressive bit of hardware, not to mention expensive, what with its proprietary low-capacity memory cards, Sony was surprisingly quick to give up on it. In spite of everything, the Vita sold reasonably well, and would have sold more if Sony cared even slightly about the thing and allowed it to actually be on sale for longer. The system released around the same time that Nintendo had a rare stumble in the handheld market with its 3DS, which had some difficulty gaining traction out of the gate. Instead of exploiting that opening, Sony stood back and gave Nintendo all the time in the world to turn their failure around into a success. And of course, Sony learned nothing from what they just watched Nintendo do. Well done all around, boys. Well done. And number 1, the launch of the PS3. When the PS3 launched in 2006, the world got one of the best and most successful consoles of all time. It's just a shame for Sony that it happened to be the Xbox 360. I'm kidding, the world actually got 2 of the best and most successful consoles of all time, because the Wii launched as well. Oh, I'm so good. Yes, the PS3 launch was so badly handled that it actually gave both of Sony's competitors their highest sales numbers ever for a home console. Sony managed to crawl back into the race by the generation's end, but the PS3 launch has to be one of the worst of all time. The problem was that it was ridiculously expensive. While the 360's lowest price version was retailing in the UK for around £210, the standard PS3 was going for £425. The PS3 also had a weak launch lineup, Resistance Fall of Man notwithstanding, and according to game studios, it was also an incredibly difficult system to develop for. The entire launch made it look like Sony was being cocky after the PS2 did so well, acting as though they didn't even have to bother trying anymore, and assuming that people would buy their system no matter what it offered or how much it cost. Thankfully, it seems they learned from their biggest mistake with the PS4 and PS5. Just wait until they inevitably do it again with the PS6, of course. These things happen in cycles, after all. Good luck, everyone.